Welcome to the And She Looked Up Creative Hour podcast with Lisa Bolton and Melissa Hartfield. We're two women who are artists and entrepreneurs, and yes, those two things can go together. This podcast is for the artists, the creators, and the makers who want to find a way to make a living creating what they love. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of the And She Looked Up Creative Podcast Hour. I'm Melissa, and I am here with my co-host, Lisa.
Hello.
Today, we are starting a month-long theme of inspiration for April, and we thought we would do something kind of fun today and kick it off with what inspires us personally. So Lisa and I have each picked 5 things that inspire us online and 5 things that inspire us offline, and we have not compared notes. So we're going to be hearing what inspires each other at the same time that you are. And we thought this would be really fun. So I'm excited for this one. I get to talk about things that I love.
I know. I'm excited to hear yours as well. And I think we might have a little bit of overlap, but we also might have a few unique ones, I think, especially on the online stuff. So yeah, I think that's kind of cool.
So tell us, what is your first offline source of inspiration?
Sure. Well, I should preface this with that we are recording in about the 3rd week of March, which is a very turbulent time right now in the world. So it's funny how there's actually been an influx of offline sort of getting out into nature ideas that have been coming at me. I find just with those of us with children at home, and people are starting to think about, how do I entertain my child if we can't go out and about, and if I have to spend time with them alone in nature. And so it's actually been really interesting to see this whole flood of ways. And I, going through a lot of them, I thought, oh my gosh, these are absolutely, really cool ways to also inspire creativity if I was in a rut. So my first one, which I will also say I'm wearing a little bit with my mom hat because it's something I'll be doing this week with my son, but it's actually a photography-based nature scavenger hunt. So I've kind of put together a couple, and I should also say that I think we should link a lot of this stuff in our show notes after the fact, so you'll be able to go back and get an idea of some of the sources of these things. But I was, we've done nature scavenger hunts. I'm a camping family, so we go out, do a lot of camping, and we've done scavenger hunts where the kids have to find different things. And as my son's gotten older, I've sort of had to get more creative with, it's not just finding a leaf now, it might be finding a particular kind of leaf, or we sort of had to up our game a bit. And one of the things that I think would be really fun is for an artist to do, or somebody who is really looking to be inspired by nature, is to take your phone with you or your camera and to have a list of things and actually shoot them and then come back and really sort of sit with all those images. So as opposed to, again, just a leaf, we've come up with some of things like something sharp or something hairy, a piece of bark, something rough, an animal's home, something yellow. So all sorts of different, not necessarily specifics, more generic things that you can interpret what you would, I guess, how you would see it through your lens. So I think that would be a really fun way to get outside, kind of look for things, have a purpose when you're outside. So you're not just sort of taking a nature walk, trail walk, you actually have a purpose to it. And then being able to come back and to scroll through that collection, I think would be a really interesting way to stimulate some creativity.
Mother Nature was on my list as well. I don't do a scavenger hunt, but I do take my phone with me everywhere I go. And I am constantly stopping, like when I'm walking the dog, to take pictures of something that I think is an interesting shape, or that is a really interesting color palette, because Mother Nature, she's the creative genius of us all, right? She knows how to make shapes work together. She knows how to make colors work together. She's the master of light. And plus you get lots of exercise and fresh air, which always gets your brain moving and gets your creative juices flowing. But I really like the idea of a scavenger hunt. That's sort of fun to make one up for yourself, to kind of kickstart a different process in your head. Yeah, I
I
like
think
that.
so. I think it sort of gives you, again, some purpose and structure. And then if you have any little ones going along with you, it also kind of makes it fun for them and can get them involved, but you're still searching for your own inspiration. So,
And structure might not sound like it's very creative, but structure can actually make you more creative. Like if you put limitations on yourself or
mm-hmm.
boundaries, like if you are only going to look for things that are red, suddenly all you see is red things because you're more in tune with that. So it can really help you sharpen your vision. My first one that I had on my list for offline inspiration is actually collaboration. I always find
Mm.
that when I work with other people or talk to other people or sit down just even for a coffee with other people, um, that really gets my creative juices flowing. And I just find the back and forth helps me see things in a different light, and it helps me trigger things that I might not have thought of before. And right now is not the time to be going out for coffee with friends and things like that. But there are like lots of other ways you can collaborate offline without, um, well, actually, they would be online right now. But things like, like right now we're doing this podcast and we're in totally different locations,
mm-hmm.
but we're collaborating. And there's so many ways that you can collaborate now. I do really love collaborating face to face and in person, but you can also collaborate via video chat, through just your voices. There's lots of different ways you can collaborate. But for me, that's just I don't know, I sort of feed off of other people's passion when they're excited for things. And that tends to make me get really excited and passionate and gets my juices going. So that's a big one for me offline. Okay, so what is your second source of offline inspiration?
So I think this is something I'm trying to do, and I think I need you actually because you're a big reader to hold me accountable to this. But reading fiction outside the genre that you normally read. So I not like an avid reader, but I miss it and I love it. And I think I used to be a lot more of a reader. I got away from it, and of late I've been getting back into it. But I found I'm definitely in a lane of fiction that I really enjoy. And I kind of go to that lane and I love it. I'm a big, I love a good sort of mystery. I love a strong female lead. But I'm trying to venture out a little bit into a little bit more historical fiction. My son really has kind of gravitated toward that type of literature. And so I'm trying to get myself into it as well. And I'm finding it's just inspiring me in terms of writing. I'm like the descriptions, the different approaches to I don't know, setting up a scene or the way the stories are unfolding or from the point of view a story is told is just so much different than what I've normally been reading. And so I really want to make a commitment in sort of my reading goals to start being more open to other genres because I've tended to have a bit of blinders on, like, I know what I like, I know what I don't like. But as I've sort of just wandered a little bit on this path of historical fiction, I've realized I need to be more open to that. And I actually find it kind of exciting. It's sort of like a new window being opened. And I think that could really help boost some of my creativity going forward.
Totally know what you're saying. I do a lot of writing for my day job, and I am a much, much, much better writer when I am reading regularly.
Mm-hmm.
It just, I find I have a better vocabulary. I'm much more aware of repeating the same words and phrases over and over again when I'm reading more. Um, so yeah, and I used to write fiction when I was younger. I haven't done it in years, but I really found that reading fiction in similar genres to what I was trying to write in really helped me get my flow going.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think there's just I've been a huge reader my whole life, and there's just so much that it brings to your creative work, whether it's new ideas, whether it's just like I said, increased vocab, increased exposure to things that are different, and all those types of things. So yeah, I'm a big fan of reading.
What was was reading one of your offline ones as well?
It was number two after collaborating, actually.
Ah, that's awesome.
I'm gonna go with a different one for my number two now. Um, Magazines are a huge one for me in so many different ways. Like I just like reading magazines because like a physical magazine, I much prefer a physical magazine to a digital magazine, although I will read a digital magazine. Um, but for me, especially as a designer, I love seeing the color palettes that are used in magazine design. I love seeing the layout and design. I get so many ideas from that. Not to mention just the content. I read a lot of um, art magazines. I love the whole Where Women Create series of magazines. I think they have four or five of them now.
Mm-hmm.
But some of them take you in behind the scenes of people's studios. Some of them show you the type of um, what they're actually creating. Some of them are business related. So all those things, like I just I love beautiful imagery, and there are things you can do in print layouts that you just don't see online, especially when you're viewing things through your phone where it's very mobile optimized. It's a very different experience. And I love the touch and the feel of magazines too. There's something about that sitting curled up with a magazine and a cup of tea that just makes me, I don't know, like I feel like I've come home.
There are so many beautiful magazines that I think people, if you can get away from the, sort of you're at your grocery store checkout idea of a magazine and really get into your bookstore, whether it's a big box or an independent, like quite often, if you dig in deep, sort of behind the shiny ones up front, there are some incredible, and they're not cheap. They're a bit of an investment, but I agree with you, especially on the Where Women Create series. I have several of those that I treasure like I would a good book or a coffee table book. Like they're beautiful.
And you're absolutely right. They are like coffee table books in their own right. But even the cheap ones you see at the cashier, like some of those are brilliant in how they do layouts and headlines, and because they're
Mm-hmm.
designed to catch your eye, and I love seeing that. But British magazines, I love British magazines. When my mom is from the UK, whenever she goes home, um, I always send her with a list of magazines she has to bring back for me. I love their food magazines. I love
Yeah.
their architecture magazines. Like there's just so many, yeah, beautiful, beautiful magazines.
A photographer I followed, and her name's going to escape me for a minute, but she actually, one of the challenges she had through a sort of a creativity challenge she was running was to take one of your images and design a magazine cover with it. So to actually put the font on, put what some of the articles would be in the magazine, and actually to lay it out. And I thought that was such a fun idea to do with one of your images, is actually to design it like it was going to be on a cover of a magazine.
I love that idea. That's I've told you a million times that
Mm-hmm.
my dream goal is to design a magazine. So like doing little like taking an image and creating a magazine page from it is to me that's just a super fun exercise. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a great idea. Okay, so number three for you.
I wrote down to declutter your creative space. So I just think sometimes pressing pause on the world and saying, I need to refresh it. Maybe you work at your kitchen table with, a few binders and a few boxes and folders, or maybe you're blessed with a 300 square foot studio. But wherever it is that you create, saying this space needs a refresh. So if you're someone who things get a little bit messy and backed up with paperwork, or maybe you've let it go for a while, just a decluttering can in fact be creatively inspiring. It can feel like, walking in to a fresh space. In my office, I love, I'll open the window and make it like even in the winter and kind of breathe fresh air into the space as I'm like putting stuff away and reorganizing. Sometimes my husband's like, you're moving stuff for the sake of moving it. I'm like, yep, absolutely. Because sometimes I just need it to look a little different. And I find that that is a bit of a reset for me. And I think even if you're someone who's very neat and organized, sometimes just maybe swapping out the art that's on your walls or mixing up your bulletin board or just sort of shifting things around can inspire something new and make you want to sit down and create again, maybe get you out of a bit of a rut.
That's a great idea. I do that quite regularly. Yeah, like you said, hitting a refresh button, like
Mm-hmm.
just sort of moving something and fresh air. I don't open my window in the winter, but I do have it open this week because it's spring and oh my gosh, it makes such a difference.
Mm-hmm.
We should just note we're on the west coast of Canada too, so we don't like get like true Canadian winters here where we get very mild winters and you open your window and you won't die.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Okay, that was not on my list.
Oh,
So,
okay. There you go.
um, my number three, this is one I almost took it off the list given where things are at right now, but I put it back on because I hope we're not going to be in this situation forever. But travel is a huge one for me. And not necessarily getting on an airplane. Sometimes it's just going to a different neighborhood or a different part of, just like a staycation trip, go like an hour or two away from home. Just seeing different visuals. Again, I'm obviously a very visual person. I find really helps me just get new ideas and get inspiration. And one of my favorite things to do when I travel, which is probably not the case for many people, but I love taking public transit. I when I go to Toronto, which I do quite often, I usually stay with a friend who lives just outside of Toronto, but he's still on the streetcar line. Even though I can get downtown from the GO train, which is also right by where he lives in 20 minutes, I will often take the 50-minute streetcar because I love the route that it takes. It goes through some really quirky, funky neighborhoods, through the old fabric district part of Toronto. And the signage is really cool. The buildings are cool. The people are very eclectic. And there's something about taking that trip, and just staring out the window that really gets my juices going. And I've had the same experience in other cities. And it's even here in Vancouver, I will often take transit and just look outside the window at what's going on. I find that really helps me.
I really like that. I don't think about that taking public transit, but you're right. It's such a great way to see different parts of the city without having to worry about driving. Like I know for me and my husband, one
Yes.
of us is navigating and we're trying to look for wherever you're going, but to be able to actually let go of the control and the responsibility of having to get to your destination and be able to look out the window, I think that's a great idea. And in this time right now, which we're in, where we're, essentially social distancing and like I've been on a bit of a lockdown. I'm actually doing this podcast today from a cabin in the woods about 6 hours north of my home, and I'm about an hour from the nearest town, and it's fantastic. It's totally, being on the water, being isolated, changing the space. I feel like I do want to sit and write and create things, and it is a refresh. Like it has a real effect just getting out of your current space and into something new. I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the brilliant things about the modern age that we are in is if you've got Google Maps on your phone and you're visiting cities in most major areas, it will tell you exactly how and where to catch transit from wherever you are to wherever you want to go. So it takes all the guesswork out of it. Like it'll tell you exactly what bus to catch and what side of the street to catch it on, and where to get on a certain subway station. And yeah, so it's super easy. I also love just things like visiting markets when I'm traveling, like food
Hmm.
markets, outdoor markets, farmers markets, all those kinds of things where there's lots of different vendors. Like it's just like a feast for the eyes. It's like a kaleidoscope of color and texture and smells and patterns, and I love that. That really, and I take a lot of pictures when I
Hmm.
do that as well. So yeah, that's a big one for me. So I'm hoping we're not too far away from that being a possibility again.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so for number 4 on my list, I had getting back into the kitchen. So doing some cooking or baking with a bit of a twist in that instead of just sort of pulling up a recipe and making it, um, trying to add your spin on it. So I'm someone who does like to cook. I'm not a big baker, but I do find that if I can put some music on, have my stuff laid out. I'm not under a time pressure. So I'm not talking about cooking for company or on a busy weeknight, but I'm talking about, to have a couple hours on the weekend and I want to try a new recipe. So it doesn't matter if it fails, there's no pressure. But I like the idea of taking something and then saying, okay, how can I maybe put my own spin on this? So I'm going to add a different ingredient, adjust things a little bit, maybe take it in a new direction. But I find that there's something when you're not cooking under pressure, when you're just really, rolling out dough or, smelling the aromas that are coming or just sort of like being able to patiently work, wet and dry together, it can really be therapeutic and inspiring. I think it sort of changes the feel in the kitchen when you sort of are activating all the senses, and I just think it's a really nice way to be able to do something that's with your hands, with your brain, with all your senses. And I just think it's a really nice, whether you are someone who likes to spend time in the kitchen or not. I think either way, if you try something new, you can step outside your comfort zone, and even if it's the simplest of things, but if you can slow that pace down, put some good music on, I think that can be helpful with sort of refiring your creative spirit.
That is actually not on my list either.
Oh, there you go.
I actually never think of being in the kitchen as a creative inspiration. To me, it's more like therapy. Like I do
Mm.
really enjoy it, but it's therapy for me. It's like when I need to work out stress or when I'm anxious or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. I like to get in and I like to stir and chop and knead and just do all those. It's like a combination of being very precise. If you're not baking, baking is very precise
Mm-hmm.
the whole way through. But if you're just cooking, it's like this combo of like precision chopping, slicing, dicing, and also just chucking things in the pan and seeing what
Seeing
happens.
what
So it's
happens.
like
Yeah.
you get structure but freedom at the same time.
Yeah, and I like taking that time, being able to do it as a food blogger, being able to do it, without that pressure, and just be able to maybe take some pictures along the way, or really take your time with plating or something. So, yeah, you're right. It is. It can be. I think it can be a source of inspiration, but I think it can be incredibly therapeutic as well.
Okay, so I think that's number 4 for me.
Yes.
One of my favorite things to do when I need a little jolt of inspiration is go to the art gallery here in Vancouver. I have a Vancouver Art Gallery membership. Um, and it is actually a business expense that my accountant lets me write off because it gives me inspiration. So there you go. But I not just that's the art gallery I have a membership to, but I love going to art galleries and museums. I to me they just feed my creative soul. Um, I do not like going with other people. I much prefer to go on my own because I, I I like going at my own pace and I like being able to stop where I want to stop for a long time and move past the things that don't interest me. And when I go with somebody, I tend to worry far too much about whether or not they're having a good time as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to just losing myself in it. So to me, to go on my own to a gallery or a museum is such a treat. And I love looking at even museums, like when you go to like a natural history museum or a civilization museum. And just, I love seeing just all the different shapes. I love looking at the ceramics and um, and fabrics and costumes and seeing all the different patterns and textures and textiles. And one of the other things that was on my list that kind of relates to this is I also love going to fabric stores for that same reason. I just love being surrounded by the colors and the textures and the patterns. And so that's something that I'm always looking for in museums and galleries and things like that. So yeah, that's a huge one for me.
I like that. Yeah, I actually had that on my list as well. Sort of art galleries, museums, science centers. I think any of those are can be great sources of inspiration. And I did have farmers markets and sort of outdoor markets on there as well, flea markets, things. So that's kind of in a little bit of that similar, but just looking for new inspiration and yeah, being kind of taking other people's art in.
Okay, number 5 for you.
So the last one I had was it's kind of actually ties a little bit back even to our magazine piece, but was to sit down and make a bit of a creative vision board for a time period. So maybe with some goals, whether it's a 6 month or a year long creative goals in mind. So, how I kind of envision this is if I'm feeling stuck, I want to sort of, and I'm not talking about like a big poster board, even if it's just an 8 by 10 sort of, um, printer size piece of paper that you attach a lot of different mediums to. So, whether you are not cutting up the good magazines, but cutting up some magazines or imagery from other places, printing off imagery, a newfound love of washi tape, whether you're gluing things onto it, but something that kind of maybe just sort of sitting down and creating something that you might put up in your office in your new sort of now decluttered creative studio and kind of putting it up and that's got some goals for the year or inspirational pieces for the year. So it doesn't necessarily have to be heavy or compass a lot of goals, but I think sometimes the art of just quietly cutting, gluing, drawing, sketching, whatever your way of doing it is, as you think about your creative goals for the year, I think can be a form of inspiration.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about vision boards and getting inspiration from those and setting goals through those. And I love that idea too. So I think well, that's a really great exercise to go through, and you get to create at the same time. My last one is a couple different things. You mentioned one of them just a minute ago, but for me, I love going to art stores, like art supply stores and flea markets and antique markets. And one of the reasons I love doing this is because I love looking at everything in those three places as a potential art supply, and asking myself what I could create with it, what I could do with it. Is this a new material that I've never used before? Is this something that I can repurpose in another way? Is it something that I can add to something? And I just love like the experience. There's something about the smell of an art supply store. I'm not talking about Michael's. I'm talking about more like an actual artist supply store. They just smell good. They smell like creativity. um, and yeah, I love being surrounded by all the possibilities, I guess. Just all the different colors. I love going through cartons of old magazines and things in flea markets and getting design inspiration from those. I just, yeah, there's just something about that whole, it to me, those are all very sensory
Mm-hmm.
places where you get a lot of visual input. And but also I like to go in with that express purpose of looking for something new to use, new to create with, as opposed to just going in like to a flea market and just looking for cool stuff.
Right, right.
um, to have like purpose, and because I tend to see things differently, I evaluate them differently from like, oh, this is a cool picture frame to hang in my living room, as opposed to like, oh, like I love the wood from this. What could I do with it? Like, those are two very different ways to look at something for me. So I like to go in with that whole idea of like looking what I can create. What could I try that I've never tried before with something that I find here?
I like that a lot. I think it's amazing what even if you're purchasing something what like just a new pen or a new art like a journal or I don't know like a new I find some of those stores like I can just bring home one little thing and it can get you going on some new ideas and it's just fun to play with it. So yeah, I love that.
All right. I think that's our 5 offline things. Okay. So let's talk about our online sources of inspiration, this is actually the one I thought we would have more overlap on, but you sounded like you thought we might have some very different ones. So I'm curious now.
I know. And you know what? I think for me, I don't know, like it's sort of the definition of online because I I kind of got specific. So I sort of went into some websites that I think are really fun sources of inspiration. I didn't stick to sort of at a high level because I think people know they can go to Pinterest or Instagram maybe as sort of the general. So I kind of stayed away from those two and sort of dove a little bit more granular into a few different websites and ideas around that.
All right. I think I was probably a little more high level, but we'll see.
Okay.
Okay, so my first source of online inspiration is YouTube. And this is a fairly new one for me. I have only become a YouTube consumer, I would say, in the last year or so. And it started because I wanted to use a new art supply. I started using Copic markers and I didn't know a lot about them, or they're very different. If you've never used an alcohol-based marker before, it's a very different experience. And so I started looking for some tutorials online to get me started, and I stumbled across a local Vancouver YouTuber called Bailey J. She had several Copic tutorials on her channel, and I became hooked. And her entire channel is, she is an art YouTuber. So everything she does on her channel is art related. And I just really got a kick out of her. So I subscribed and I started looking for more art channels on YouTube. And I was stunned by how much content there is out there. I had no idea, like none. And so now that is one of my absolute favorite places to go for inspiration. I watch so many different artists, everything from Copic marker to manga artists to watercolors. It just also other people in creative spaces that I'm not necessarily into, but that I really enjoy watching. I am completely hooked on YouTubers who do snail mail and pen paling. I I love seeing studio tours. A lot of artists will do behind the scenes and studio tours of their workspaces. I could watch those all day. I love watching speed paints. Speed paints are a weird thing. They're like watching somebody create a piece of art, but they speed it up. So instead of it taking 3 hours, it takes an hour or half an hour, whatever. And there is something about watching those that gives me tremendous confidence in trying a new skill. I don't know what it is. I think
Mm.
because when you see it sped up, you see just how simple the movements are that they're making. Like somebody draws a flower and you watch them sped up and it's like, oh my God, it is so easy to draw a flower. um, Sounds very counterintuitive because it's sped up. You're not watching it slowly, you're watching it fast. And watching those kind of videos just gives me tremendous confidence. There's a Russian watercolor, actually, I think she's from Ukraine, watercolor artist that I love watching. And I think if I ever tried to do what she does, I would be terrible at it. But watching her do it is so soothing and she just makes it look so incredibly easy. And I just really enjoy that. So YouTube has been a big one for me. And in the show notes, I'll list some of the YouTubers that I really enjoy watching if people want to check them out.
Yeah, you really got me hooked on the YouTube art scene in general. Like I didn't really realize I don't know, I think I always thought YouTube was like I don't know, like college kids being stupid or jokes and I just didn't realize the level of like oh, the art stuff that you like I that's sort of where I started learning how to do doodles. And I think the studio tours, I agree, are amazing. Watching people art journal, I find really interesting. And it's just a medium I had never used much or consumed much. And the more I heard you talk about it, I've sort of got into it a little bit. And I get the appeal.
Yeah, YouTube is really good at suggesting new things for you to watch, and you can find yourself 3 hours later um, completely down a different track than what you thought you were going to be doing. But yeah, that is something that I actually make time for now. I try to have one evening a week where I um, Chromecast my YouTube to my TV and I just set up a queue of all the art channels that I follow and their new content, and I will sit there and I will watch for 2 or 3 hours. And just to me, that's just part of my creative process now.
That's cool.
So, you're first.
Um,
online inspiration?
well, my first one is it's a website of a woman. It's called thejealouscurator.com. And she's I think she's did an undergrad in visual arts and she did her master's in graphic design. Like she's been around for a long time. She started it back in 2009, a blog. And now she's got TED Talks. She's written 4 books. Her most recent book is actually called A Big Important Art Book Now with Women, and it's pretty cool. And she's written a book called Your Inner Critic is a Big Jerk. And I just really like her. So she started the blog because she said all she would do is look at other people's art and it would just make her jealous. So the whole idea was turning jealousy into get your butt back into the studio inspiration. That's the tagline. So she features amazing art, and for her it was, she said, I needed to find a way to turn all this other art that I found beautiful, but it was making me frustrated that I wasn't better. So she said I needed to kind of make that into a more positive experience. And so she started posting the art and then talking about it and sharing it. And it was in a positive light. So it kind of helped her get through creative blocks. And now she's got a podcast, and she, like I said, she's done TED Talks, written books. And so it's called The Jealous Curator. And I like that. I like the honesty at which she came at it, because as someone who feels very new to a lot of this space and I kind of want to try a lot of these different things, I think I have that feeling a lot, that's really inspiring, but I could never do that. And I think the way she presents it and talks about it really does be like, no, takes a minute, say, don't reflect it back on yourself and about your inability to maybe create that piece, but pull out from what I'm sharing with you, the things that you love about it and what is appealing to you or what you don't like about it. And she doesn't just do art, like a painting. She does all sorts. She features writing and all different mediums. So it's a pretty cool website. And she's really interesting. So whether you consume her online or through the podcast or even through just her books, I think it's a great website to bookmark.
I have one of her books. I have Creative Block, and I discovered her through a podcast interview. I cannot remember who interviewed her, but as soon as I heard like what she was doing, I thought the title of her blog was like
Yeah,
fantastic.
it's so
Like,
true.
I just thought that was so cool, and I checked her out, fell in love immediately. Yeah. Um, okay, so my second one is also a person, and it's someone I've spoken about before to you. His name is David Duchemin, and he is a photographer. But I first discovered him through his blog. He wrote a book. So he's kind of an online, offline inspiration for me. He wrote a book called Within the Frame, and another one called Vision Mongers. And these are two books that I have read over and over again. You do not need to be a photographer to get something out of these. Within the Frame, if you are any kind of visual artist, that is a book that you will find very useful. And Vision Mongers is about earning a living as a photographer, but so much of the advice he gives is also about earning a living as a creative. But it's his blog that I really was really captivated by at first. He has this very unique voice and knack for inspiring you while kicking you in the butt at the same time and making you feel good about it. Whenever I just need a little perk or a pick me up, I will go read his blog. He's been blogging for, oh gosh, I've been following him since probably 2008. Like he's been around online a long time. And he wrote an article. I cannot remember the name of it, but I will link to it in the show notes because it completely changed my whole take on creative burnout and inspiration, where he compares creativity to waves in the ocean and riding waves and waiting for the next wave to come. And I read it when I was going through a serious case of burnout, and it really altered my thinking. There's just something about how he writes. And he also has a fantastic podcast that both of us love. It's called A Beautiful Anarchy. It's fairly new. It's very short. It's like 10 or 15-minute episodes once a week, where he talks about creativity and inspiration and earning earning your living creating art. And yeah, I'm just a big fan of his. Everything he puts out just sort of seems to hit the right note with
I
me.
totally had him on my list. Again, you
That's so
introduced me to
funny.
him, and I, so I came at him super late, and I came at him through the podcast that he started. And just, I
Mhm.
love, I don't know, there's something about the way he articulates ideas, the sound of his voice, just cadence, the cadence of his voice. And I've re listened to several episodes scrambling to take notes and takeaways that I want to go back and read again. Like, I completely, yes, I would recommend him to so many people.
He just has this way of articulating exactly what's going through your head, but also making you um, see solutions or see opportunities or realize that you're being really silly without making you
Mm-hmm.
feel stupid or bad about yourself. Um, and his background is he used to earn a living as a comedian, so he has a stage presence. And he also, I believe, went to theology school. I think he might have even been um, like a preacher or a priest or not a priest, but uh, I'm not religious. I don't know all the words. A pastor. Yes, that's the word I'm looking for. Pastor. Um, but so I think he comes at it from like he has all these different lenses he sees it through, like a theologian's lens, a comedian's lens, an artist's lens, an entrepreneur's lens. He's very entrepreneurial. He's done some really incredible entrepreneurial work that I am such a fan of. So yeah, I can't say enough about him. He's one of my favorites for sure. Okay. So you're number two now.
So my number two was one that I stumbled upon when I was writing my book, and it's a website called Letters of Note, and essentially it is a place. They also have a hard copy book that you can purchase, but the blog in and of itself is a great way to consume it. It is the concept is basically it's correspondence deserving of a wider audience. So it's really interesting letters from all over the world, all different types. So they could be a letter that, a guy in the army wrote back in World War I back to his wife at home, or it could be an internal memo written a year ago from a CEO to its employees. But they're letters that are really, really interesting. There are so many archives. Like, I think they have, it's, I don't know, it's over 1,000 letters are on the site. So if you're looking for something romantic or inspiring or devastating or sad, like, you can search terms and it will pull up letters that people have written all around the world, and they're just so, it's just a really interesting way if you're looking for a written word inspiration. I found for me, just writing so much of the same types of sentences and looking for new, again, I think we talked a little bit even when we talked about the offline stuff about just reading a different genre, but I found this was just a really fun website, bit of a rabbit hole. You can really get into it, called Letters of Note. And it's just a really neat way to watch our language evolve over the years and to hear how people communicate with each other in all different situations. And yeah, I really like it as an interesting website.
I am going to totally have to check that out. That sounds so up my alley. One of my favorite books that I have ever read is 84 Charing Cross Road, which was actually turned into a movie with Anthony Hopkins in it. And it was one of those movies where I was terrified they would screw it up because I loved the book so much, but they didn't. They did a really good job. And the book, it's not fiction. It's a nonfiction book, and it is a series of letters written between a New York writer with a secondhand bookshop in London on Charing Cross Road, which Charing Cross Road used to be known for its bookstores. I don't know if it still is, but it was this correspondence that went on for years between uh, these two people, along with a few other members of the store. And it's so touching and heartwarming and just one of the most good books you'll ever read, of just watching what started out as a purely business relationship evolve into this very warm friendship across the ocean. It takes place in the 1940s. I think it starts in the 40s and goes through the 50s, sort of like end of World War II. The UK was still going through rationing, but you've got this really brash New York female writer. And yeah, lovely book. You should read
I
that. I
will
think you'd really
actually.
enjoy it.
I will. I haven't read it. That's awesome. Yeah, this is a good website. It's got, I mean, it's even got, if you're looking for lighter things, it's got like, I don't know, there's like Star Trek casting letters and Conan O'Brien letters from him. Like, so it's just all over the place. So yeah, you would really enjoy it, I think. Yeah.
Okay, number three. So my third one is podcasts. I find podcasts really, I don't know, there's just something, I think maybe partly because I tend to listen to them when I'm walking, and it's just the act of walking and listening and having all these ideas pour directly into your brain from somebody's voice that really gets me inspired. And I already mentioned David Duchovny's A Beautiful Anarchy, but some of the other ones that I really love listening to, I love The Creative Pen by Joanna Penn. She is an independent author, and the podcast is around the business of being an independent author, but also the craft of being an independent writer. And she has some really interesting guests on there. She's a long time podcaster, so she's got a very good rhythm, and she knows what she's doing behind a microphone. I also really enjoy How I Built This, which is an NPR podcast, which they interview entrepreneurs who's built some of the biggest companies in the world. So things like Patagonia, Five Guys Burgers, and just hearing the whole evolution of these people's businesses from, starting out in their garage to becoming these huge companies that have been very successful. And the fellow who does the interviewing does not shy away from the hard stuff either. So you hear a lot of the really challenging parts of their story, which is very reassuring in a way, to sort of realize, like, I'm doing this thing here, and here's this person who's super successful that I look up to, and yet it wasn't easy for them. It isn't easy for anybody. There's some reassurance in hearing that. I also love Design Matters, A Creative Pep Talk. That's another great one that I find really helpful. Goal Digger with Jenna Kutcher. I also, one that I've just discovered is The Product Boss, which is two women who help small creators build and market their product lines. And it's so interesting listening to some of the people that they talk to. So yeah, I really love hearing other people's creative journeys. I find that very inspiring for me. So I love podcasts that interview other people and give you a sense of what their journey has been and what their challenges are. And it just always, I find it very reassuring, and it often gives me a lot of new ideas too, of things that I could try or do that could help move me forward.
That's awesome. It's funny because I had The Beautiful Anarchy. That's where I had David, but I kind of had in brackets there podcasts in general as a source of inspiration, because I do think this is not unlike YouTube. I feel like I got into them probably about at least a year, maybe a year and a half ago, more than ever, where I'm actually, anytime I have to drive anywhere, it's, the first thing that goes on. And sometimes I'll go to school pickup early because I want to sit outside and like finish an episode. And I've caught my husband even in the garage, in the car when he's pulled in. I'm like, "Are you coming in?" He's like, "I just need to hear the last 5 minutes." Like, it's such a fun medium, and the level of niche that you can get into with whatever makes you smile, makes you sad, or just holds your interest, it's out there for you. And there are so many, and the ones you mentioned, that's because I had Jenna's on my list as well, like as a podcast that I find inspiring. It's a bit of a kick in the butt, so it's less even of a creative inspiration, more of a like, you can do this, just put your head down, enough procrastinating. Like, yeah, a bit of that kick in the butt sort of approach to things.
Yeah, Jenna's a great one because she really kind of she sort of is equal parts inspiration and equal parts interviewing other people. So you get a good dose of her, but you also get a good dose of other points of view. And I really like that. She kind of bridges that nicely.
Mm-hmm.
Another one that I didn't mention because they've been on hiatus for a little bit, but it's Dear Handmade Life, and this
Oh,
is
yeah.
by yeah, that's a great one, and they've been quiet for a little bit. They do this regularly. But they're the folks behind the Craftcation conference that happens every year that always sells out for handmade makers, and one that I would love to go to. It's on my list of conferences I would love to get to. But they have a great podcast with some really really interesting guests. And Chase Jarvis Live. I
Oh.
have been a fan of Chase for eons.
Mm-hmm.
um, he started out as a photographer. He's based in Seattle, so he's not far away, and he has fascinating guests. His interviews are he does them as a podcast, but he also does them as a YouTube show with an in studio audience of creatives who can ask questions live. This is really, and his guests are always so interesting. Just people, often I've never heard of them, and they're in a niche or a genre that I am completely unfamiliar with, but they just have really interesting points of view, and I love that. That was my number three. It's your number three now. Is that right?
Yeah. Um, my number three,
Okay.
yeah, no, it is another local couple. They have a website called Poppy Talk. And essentially, two creatives, they both have design backgrounds, Jan and Earl, and they have been around again for a lot of years. And they have grown their blog. They really started out as doing a lot of design work, and then they kind of got into decor, and they have branched out, but they have, I feel like they have a little bit of something for everyone, but it's not highly curated in what I think has become a bit of the umbrella of what you might think of a lifestyle blog. This is not beautifully staged flat lays at all. This is like real life. They've partnered with people like IKEA and done hacks with them. They've been featured with Design Sponge. They've even been in InStyle magazine. Like I call it a bit perfectly imperfect. They actually ended up partnering a while ago with Target and created their own line of glamping product. They're just really quirky and interesting, and I love seeing what they're doing because it's always very accessible. Sometimes I find there's so much styled content that feels just so put together that for myself, I find it can be a little bit unattainable. It doesn't fire me up, and it doesn't come across as super original all the time. Sometimes I feel like the imagery I'm seeing becomes a little bit repetitive. And Poppy Talk, they're just kind of quirky and different, and they've really created this incredibly successful niche and done partnering with some incredible Fortune 500 companies, and yet still managed to do so in a way that I find inspiring. And so I'd highly recommend sort of checking out about there. And they're based out of Vancouver too, which I think is pretty cool.
I have been following them for years. Again, they were one of those original
Yeah.
blogs out there that I think I was following them before I quit my job. Yeah, everything you said, I totally agree with. They're just I didn't know they had done a Target collaboration.
Yeah.
So that's cool. Okay, so my fourth one is actually in a very similar vein. It is Holly Becker from Decorate. And if you're not familiar with her site, she's another one of these original bloggers who I've been following for well over a decade. The site is decor with the letter or with the number 8, so decor 8. And she was, one of those original bloggers I followed on the Blogger platform. I don't know if she's still on Blogger. She's an American, but she is based out of one of the Scandinavian countries. I'm pretty sure it's Sweden. She has done all of it. She's done books. She does workshops. When I first started blogging for like as more of a part of my career, she had a course on how to blog, and I I took that. She's also somebody who's very good at curating again, and she does a lot of curation and promoting other artists and all those types of things. And yeah, she's just one of my favorites. She has been for years.
Love it. I'm not familiar with her. I shouldn't say that. I've heard of Decorate, but it's not one I've really fully consumed. So I will definitely have to check that out.
Yeah, there's something about her that reminds me a little bit of you too. I'm not sure
Oh,
what it is. If it's just you resemble each other a little bit, or but she has a little boy as well, I believe,
aw.
probably around the same age. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, just one of my all-time favorites. So you're number four.
So my number four is a relatively new find, and I've kind of lumped it all under one. And it's funny because it actually goes back to your number four from offline, but essentially it is virtual field trips, access that you have to incredible things around the world without ever having to leave. So, I found out things like you can get up close and personal with the mud volcano and the mammoth hot springs at Yellowstone National Park. They take you right up into it, probably closer than you could get in real life, and really experience the sounds and the colors and really feel like you're there. I learned that the Louvre and the Great Wall of China offer virtual field trips, and even things like the San Diego Zoo. You can actually get like a perspective of, being one of the penguins or one of the many animals that are there. And I just thought this is such a cool way to go and experience these things that if you can't get there in real life, if you can find a virtual way in there, I think that can be a really interesting source of inspiration that you might not get to go visit in real life for a while.
Yeah, there's so much neat stuff that they can do right now. And if I think there's any one good thing that's going to come out of this whole situation that we're in right now, is it has been so fascinating to watch so many creatives and artists, and even like the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra did a live performance on the weekend to an empty theater. They're discovering that there are so many ways that you can still connect with an audience without having to be in the same space. And I think that we're going to see more and more of that. And I think it's so cool. Like, I love it. I've been following the Shed Aquarium. I believe they're out of Chicago, just for the last 4 or 5 days. A friend recommended them to me, and they've just been so wonderful and so lighthearted to follow. They've been letting their animals roam the aquarium.
I've seen
The
this. It's
penguins going out.
amazing. Yeah,
Have you
yeah,
seen?
yeah, I have. It's so cute. And yeah, it's pretty cool. Even Google now has got it's an app, Google Arts and Science. I'll have to look that one up. But it's an app that allows you again to go into the Met or go into these really famous places and it kind of experience it. I think it's pretty cool.
All right. So my number five is is kind of a weird one, but whatever. I like browsing sites like Creative Market or font marketplaces, even Etsy. Etsy is a much bigger, more stuff on it. But I love sites like Creative Market, which for those of you who don't know what it is, it's a marketplace where you can go buy templates, fonts, um, ebook templates, Pinterest templates, just templates for anything. You can either sell your templates on there or you can purchase them to help you in your business. And I just like scrolling through and seeing what people are making and selling online, and just like things that I would never have thought to
Hmm.
do, like create a coloring sheet for people to download and color. Or, and I am a font junkie, so I love going to font marketplaces and just seeing what new fonts are available. And often what the marketplaces will do is they'll show you different ways you can use that font. And I just love browsing them. It's like, I don't know, it's not very original or anything, but it really does kind of get my creative juices going.
I like that. I think it's really fun looking for new fonts I've been on Creative Market. You're right. That's actually a really good one. That's a good one.
Yeah, so that's my last one. So I think we're on your last one now.
Well, my last one, and it's kind of a two-parter, or because you could kind of go either way, but I chose Creative Live and Skillshare. And basically, I mean, both of those sites they've got a lot of similarities. I mean, I really took advantage of Creative Live. I think you could probably throw Lynda, Lynda, in there even as well, but they're just places where you can learn. And a lot of times, I mean, a lot of them have free trials, but I'm talking learn anything from the nitty gritty details inside a specific Adobe suite of products, or intro to photography and everything in between, any medium. They have got just the quality of classes that they can bring to you wherever you are, not having to leave your house. I was really blown away, and I really took advantage of it when I was trying to get to know my camera. So I'd gotten a new Nikon. It was sort of my first DSLR, and I really didn't know what I was doing. And I started getting into some of the courses that were offered via both of these sites, actually. And it was pretty amazing what I was able to access, and just at my own pace. And I just think if you're really considering either deepening your skills in a certain area, or if you're looking to try something new, Creative Live, Skillshare, Lynda are all ones I would sort of lump together as places to go and see if you can access. And if you can't even access them as a free trial, a lot of the price point of entry is super reasonable. They're always having deals on things. And then a lot of them even just have a blog, like they kind of introduce you to certain artists or instructors. I found I would just then Google those instructors and find their work, and that would often take me down a path of, a lot of them have their own podcasts or stores or own suite of offerings through their own blogs that I find it's just been a really interesting gateway. So I would definitely recommend those as sort of online sources.
I totally agree. I have bought classes through Creative Live, and I have a Skillshare membership. I actually do pay the $10 a month
Yeah.
for access to Skillshare because I find it so useful. And they do have great intro offers. If you follow a lot of YouTubers like I do, like I mentioned, a lot of them are a lot of the art YouTubers are sponsored by Skillshare, and they will have some really great offers where you can get several months free. And lynda.com is another great one. And the cool thing with Lynda, a lot of libraries will give you free access to lynda.com with your library card.
That's right. You're
If you
absolutely
can't
right.
afford access, there is a way to get free access through your library. And they have some really great content on there.
So that, I think, is our full list. I think we've covered off 10 plus on both offline and online.
Yeah, that was really fun. I am definitely going to be checking out Letters of Note later tonight. I think that sounds so cool.
I love it. Yeah, no, I think this will be good. And I think we'll be able to sort of consolidate these lists and have it available. So whether you're sort of stuck in online and you can't leave your house like we can't right now, or if you're able to get out and about and travel, yeah, hopefully those are some really good sources. I'm kind of excited about this month. I feel like after spending the last month really talking about courage and taking those risks and stuff, it's like I feel ready to jump back into starting something new. So I'm kind of excited now. I feel actually inspired just having this conversation.
I know, me too. And so next week we're going to talk about cultivating inspiration in your daily life. Like we've shared with you what's inspiring to us, like very specific things, but we're going to talk about some more general ways that you can actually bring cultivating inspiration into your daily routine. And we're also going to do an episode. We're gonna borrow from Austin Kleon and do
Yep.
an episode on stealing like an artist. And we're going to wrap up the month talking about ways that you as a creative, or us as creatives, can also inspire others, because I think that's really important too, to recognize that we can be very inspirational to people who follow us. It's kind of a way that you can give back to all those people who have inspired you.
Well, thanks for the lovely chat. I think that was great.
Yeah. All right, everybody. We will talk to you next week.
Thank you so much for joining us for the And She Looked Up Creative Hour. Be sure to check out the show notes for any links or resources we talked about in this episode. If you enjoyed the chat, please be sure to subscribe, and you will automatically be notified when the new shows are released, and we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a review, tell us where you're listening from, or even just send a note to say hi. You can find us at andshелookedup.com or on Instagram under andshелookedup. Thanks so much for listening.